Have you ever trusted someone with your entire world, only to watch them shatter it in a single moment? For Sarah, 6 months pregnant and glowing with joy, the future seemed perfect. She had a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a baby on the way. But a single knock on the door was about to change everything. What she saw when she opened it wasn't just a betrayal. It was the end of her marriage, her trust, and the life she thought she knew. This is a story about how the deepest secrets can hide in plain sight, and how a woman's strength is forged in the fires of heartbreak. The scent of lemon and rosemary still clung to the air, a phantom of the roasted chicken Sarah had made for dinner. It was their favorite, a simple, comforting meal that felt like a hug from the inside out. At 6 months pregnant, every sensation was amplified. The gentle flutter of the baby kicking beneath her ribs, the warmth of the house settling around her, the deep, abiding love she felt for her husband, Ben. Their life, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined street in suburban Ohio, was a carefully constructed masterpiece of shared dreams and quiet contentment. Sarah traced the rim of her chamomile tea, her gaze drifting around the living room. Every object held a story. The slightly too large leather armchair was the first piece of furniture they'd bought together, a compromise between her love for modern lines and his penchant for oversized comfort. On the mantelpiece, a collection of photos chronicled their journey. A sun-drenched selfie from their honeymoon in Italy, a goofy picture with their golden retriever, Gus, and, most recently, a grainy ultrasound image, a tiny, miraculous profile that had already stolen their hearts. Ben was late. Not unusually so. His work as a senior architect at a prestigious downtown firm often demanded long hours. He was driven, ambitious, a man who built futures not just with blueprints and steel, but with a fierce dedication to the life they were creating. She admired his passion, even when it meant quiet dinners alone. Tonight, however, a strange restlessness had settled over her. The baby was particularly active, a tiny acrobat performing a full routine. And Gus whined softly by the door, his tail giving a half-hearted thump against the hardwood floor every few seconds. "He'll be home soon, boy," she murmured, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. Gus leaned into her touch, but his eyes remained fixed on the door. Theirs was a love story that had felt pre-written, a destiny she'd never questioned. They'd met in college, a classic tale of a jock falling for the artsy, introspective girl. Ben, with his easy smile and confident charm, had seen past her quiet exterior to the passionate heart within. He'd made her feel seen, cherished. He was her rock, the steady hand that grounded her when her own anxieties threatened to pull her under. He was the man who held her when she cried over a sad movie. The man who knew her coffee order by heart. The man who whispered promises of forever into her hair as they fell asleep at night. As the clock on the mantel ticked past 9, a sliver of unease pierced through her contentment. He hadn't called. He always called. It was one of their unspoken rules, a small courtesy that meant the world to her. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her thumb hovering over his contact. "Don't be the needy, pregnant wife," she chided herself. He was probably just caught up in a meeting, his phone silenced. She pushed herself up from the sofa, the weight of the baby making the simple movement a deliberate effort. A walk around the house might soothe her nerves. She wandered into the nursery, a room painted a soft, gender-neutral sage green. The crib, a beautiful oak piece Ben had spent an entire weekend assembling, stood against the far wall. Tiny, impossibly small clothes were neatly folded in the dresser. She ran her hand over a soft, yellow onesie, embroidered with a little duckling. A wave of love, so fierce and protective it took her breath away, washed over her. This baby, their baby, was the culmination of everything they were, everything they hoped to be. It was then that she heard it, the low rumble of a car engine idling outside. But it wasn't the familiar, throaty purr of Ben's Audi. This was a deeper, less refined sound. Gus let out a sharp bark, his body tensing. Sarah's heart began to beat a little faster. She moved to the front window, peering through a gap in the curtains. A sleek, black sedan she didn't recognize was parked at their curb. The engine cut out and the headlights dimmed, plunging the street back into its sleepy, suburban quiet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the passenger door opened. Ben! Relief washed over her, so potent it made her feel dizzy. He was home. He must have gotten a ride with a colleague. She was being silly, letting her pregnancy hormones get the best of her. She turned from the window, a smile already forming on her lips, ready to greet him with a playful scolding for not calling. But then she heard another car door open, the driver's side. A woman emerged. Even in the dim glow of the street lamp, Sarah could see she was tall and slender, with a cascade of dark hair that fell over her shoulders. She was wearing a trench coat, cinched tightly at the waist, and high heels that made a sharp, confident click on the pavement as she walked around the car to join Ben. Sarah froze, her hand still on the curtain. She watched as the woman reached up and straightened Ben's tie, her movements intimate, familiar. Ben's head was bowed, and he said something Sarah couldn't hear. The woman laughed, a sound that didn't reach the house, but was evident in the tilt of her head and the way her shoulders shook. Then, Ben leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a deep, lingering kiss, the kind reserved for lovers, for partners, for the person you share your life with. It was the kind of kiss he hadn't given Sarah in months. The world tilted on its axis. The air in the room grew thick and heavy, impossible to breathe. The lemon and rosemary scent that had been so comforting moments before now turned cloying, nauseating. The baby gave a sudden, sharp kick, as if sensing its mother's distress. Sarah's mind struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. It was a scene from a movie, a nightmare. It couldn't be real. Not her Ben. Not their life. There had to be an explanation, a misunderstanding, a trick of the light. But there was no mistaking the way he placed his hand on the small of the woman's back, guiding her toward the house. There was no mistaking the proprietary way she leaned into him, and there was no mistaking the sound of their shared, low laughter as they approached the front door. A key scraped in the lock. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She couldn't be here. She couldn't face this. Not now. Not like this. Her instinct was to run, to hide, to disappear into the sage-green walls of the nursery and pretend this wasn't happening. But another instinct, a primal, protective one, rose up to meet the panic. This was her home, her life, her baby. She would not cower in the shadows while her world was being dismantled on her doorstep. Her feet, heavy as lead, carried her from the window, through the living room, and into the entryway. Her hand was on the doorknob, her knuckles white. She could hear their voices now, muffled, but clear through the wood. Just for a minute, the woman's voice, smooth as silk. I want to see it. I don't know, Jessica, Ben's voice, hesitant, but not resistant. Sarah's home. She's probably asleep, the woman, Jessica, purred. Come on, Ben. Don't be a coward. The key turned. The lock clicked. Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath, the last breath of the woman she used to be. And then she opened the door. The sight that greeted her would be seared into her memory forever. Ben, her Ben, stood on their welcome mat, his hand intertwined with the slender, manicured fingers of the beautiful woman beside him. Their faces, caught in the warm glow of the entryway light, were a mixture of surprise and, in Ben's case, a flicker of something that looked horrifyingly like guilt. But it was the woman's expression that struck Sarah the most. It wasn't shame or embarrassment. It was a cool, appraising confidence, a look of ownership. The silence that fell was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all the air from the space between them. The only sound was the frantic, terrified thumping of Sarah's own heart, a drumbeat marking the end of her marriage. The universe seemed to contract, shrinking to the confines of the brightly lit doorway. For a long, suspended moment, the three of them were frozen in a tableau of domestic horror. Ben's face, usually so open and readable to her, was a canvas of warring emotions, shock, fear, and a flash of pathetic, deer-in-the-headlights panic. His hand, which had been so confidently holding the other woman's, dropped away as if her skin had suddenly turned to fire. The woman, Jessica, however, barely flinched. Her dark eyes, cool and assessing, swept over Sarah, taking in the swell of her belly, the soft, worn maternity sweater, the look of utter devastation that must have been written all over her face. There was no surprise in those eyes, only a flicker of something that looked like triumph. "Sarah," Ben stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. He took a half-step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture that was both instinctive and insulting. It's not what it looks like." The cliché was so absurd, so grotesquely inadequate for the scene playing out, that a bubble of hysterical laughter threatened to rise in Sarah's throat. She swallowed it down, the effort tasting like bile. "Not what it looks like?" Her voice was unnaturally calm, a thin sheet of ice over a raging sea of pain. "What exactly do you think it looks like, Ben?" She kept her eyes locked on his, refusing to give the other woman the satisfaction of her attention. She would not be the hysterical, weeping wife. She would not break. Not yet. The baby inside her gave another sharp kick, a tiny, insistent reminder of what was at stake. It was for this child, this innocent life, that she had to hold herself together. "She's a colleague," Ben said, the lie clumsy and transparent. "Jessica Reynolds. We were just finishing up a project. I was giving her a ride home." "A ride home," Sarah repeated, her voice dripping with a sarcasm she didn't know she possessed. "Does that normally involve a romantic stroll to my front door and a key to my house?" Jessica finally spoke, her voice as smooth and polished as her manicure. "Ben, darling, perhaps we should go." She placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of ownership that was as blatant as a brand. "Darling." The word was a poisoned dart, and it hit its mark. Sarah's composure finally cracked. A single hot tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "You will not call him that in my house." She finally turned her gaze to Jessica, and the full force of her fury and betrayal was unleashed. "And you," she said, her voice low and trembling with rage, "will get the hell off my property." Jessica's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Your property? That's funny. From what Ben's told me, this house is as much his as it is yours. Maybe more, considering who's been paying the mortgage." The cruelty of the remark was breathtaking. It was a calculated strike, designed to wound and diminish her. Sarah had quit her job as a graphic designer a year ago, a mutual decision they'd made to focus on starting a family. Ben had insisted, saying he wanted to provide for her, to let her focus on her health and the baby. Now, that loving gesture was being twisted into a weapon against her. The power imbalance in their relationship, something she had never truly felt before, was suddenly stark and terrifying. He held all the cards, the income, the career, and now, apparently, the secrets. "Get out!" Sarah repeated, her voice shaking but firm. Ben, finally seeming to grasp the severity of the situation, turned to Jessica. "You should go," he said, his voice low. "Now." Jessica gave him a look of pure disdain, a silent communication passing between them that spoke of shared secrets and broken promises. With a final, contemptuous glance at Sarah, she turned on her heel and walked back to her car, her heels clicking a sharp, defiant rhythm on the pavement. The moment the car door slammed shut, the fragile dam of Sarah's control broke. The silence in the entryway was deafening, filled with the unspoken words, the years of lies that had led them to this moment. Ben stood there, looking lost and broken, but Sarah could find no pity in her heart. All she could see was the ghost of his kiss with another woman, the casual intimacy of her hand on his tie. "How long?" she asked, the words tearing from her throat. "Sarah, please," he begged, stepping toward her. "Let's go inside. We can talk about this." "Don't touch me," she cried, recoiling as if he were a stranger. And in that moment, he was. The man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, had vanished. In his place was a liar, a cheat, a man who could look her in the eye day after day while living a double life. "How long, Ben?" she demanded again, her voice rising. He flinched, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of distress she now saw as pure performance. He couldn't even look at her. His eyes darted around the entryway, landing on the photo on the console table, the two of them smiling on their wedding day. He finally sighed, a sound of utter defeat. A little over a year. A year. The word hit her with the force of a physical blow. A year. 12 months. 365 days of lies, while they were trying for a baby. While she was going through fertility treatments, the hope and heartbreak of each month, a shared burden she thought they were carrying together. While she was finally, miraculously, pregnant with their child. He had been with another woman. The sheer scale of the deception was incomprehensible. It wasn't a one-night mistake, a moment of weakness. It was a calculated long-term betrayal. Every late night at the office, every business trip, every loving word, every tender touch was now tainted, a lie layered upon a lie. "A year," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "You brought her to our home." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a realization that the sanctity of their shared space had been violated long before tonight. "No, not like that," he said quickly. "She's never been inside, I swear. But you were going to bring her inside tonight, weren't you?" she shot back. If I had been asleep, as she so helpfully suggested, he had no answer. The guilt was written all over his face, a confession more damning than any words. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness. The anger was still there, a hot, molten core in the pit of her stomach, but it was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of loss. The future she had so carefully mapped out, the family dinners, the first steps, the Christmases and birthdays, had been erased. "You need to pack a bag," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What? Sarah, no. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. For the baby. The baby." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "You want to talk about the baby now? Did you think about the baby when you were with her? Did you think about us at all?" "Of course I did," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I love you, Sarah. I never stopped loving you." "Love?" The word was a mockery. You don't destroy the person you love. You don't lie to them for a year. You don't bring your mistress to the home you share. That's not love, Ben. I don't know what it is, but it's not love." She turned and walked into the living room, her body moving on autopilot. She couldn't stand in the entryway a moment longer, in the space where her world had ended. She sank onto the sofa, her hands instinctively going to her belly, a protective shield around her child. Ben followed her, his desperation palpable. "Please don't do this. Don't throw away everything we have. I'm not the one who threw it away," she said, looking up at him, her eyes clear and resolute. The tears had stopped. In their place was a cold, hard certainty. "You made your choice, Ben. You made it every day for the past year. Now I'm making mine." She watched him, the man she had loved more than life itself, and felt nothing but a vast, empty chasm. The power he had held over her, the power of her love and trust, was gone. He had shattered it, and in doing so, he had set her free. It was a terrifying, painful freedom. But it was freedom nonetheless. "I want you gone," she said, her voice steady. "Pack a bag and leave. We can talk about the rest later, through lawyers." The word lawyers hung in the air between them, a final, irrevocable severing of their bond. Ben stared at her, his face ashen. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a dawning realization that this was real. This was happening. He had broken them, and there was no going back. Without another word, he turned and walked up the stairs. Sarah sat perfectly still, listening to the sounds of him moving around in their bedroom. The opening and closing of drawers, the rustle of clothes. Each sound was a small death. The dismantling of their shared life. 10 minutes later, he came back down, a duffel bag in his hand. He paused at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes pleading with her one last time. But Sarah's face was a mask of stone. She would not give him the absolution he so desperately wanted. He walked to the door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He opened it, then paused, his hand on the knob. "I am so sorry, Sarah," he whispered. She didn't answer. She just stared straight ahead, at the wall of photos that chronicled a life that no longer existed. The door closed behind him, the click of the latch echoing in the silent house. And Sarah, finally alone, wrapped her arms around her belly and began to sob. They were not the tears of a woman who had lost her husband. They were the tears of a woman who had lost herself. The drive was a blur. Sarah couldn't remember making the conscious decision to leave, only the visceral need to escape the four walls that had become a prison of memories. The sage-green nursery, once a sanctuary of hope, now felt like a monument to her naivety. The leather armchair, the photos on the mantel, the scent of rosemary and lemon, everything was tainted, poisoned by the truth. She had thrown a few essentials into an overnight bag, her movements jerky and robotic, and called her older sister, Rachel. "Can I come stay?" she'd asked, her voice a raw, broken thing. There was no hesitation, no probing questions, just a simple, immediate, "Of course, the spare room is always ready for you. Drive safe." Now, navigating the familiar highway that led from her quiet suburban street to the bustling city of Columbus, Sarah felt a profound sense of dislocation. The world outside her car continued on as normal. Headlights streamed past. Billboards advertised smiling families and dream vacations. The radio played a cheerful pop song. It was a surreal contrast to the wreckage of her inner world. She was a ghost, haunting her own life, invisible to the oblivious people around her. Rachel lived in a charming, slightly chaotic brick duplex in the heart of the short north, a vibrant arts district that was a world away from Sarah's manicured lawns and quiet cul-de-sacs. When Sarah pulled up to the curb, Rachel was already on the porch, a silhouette of unwavering support against the bright lights of a nearby gallery. The moment Sarah stepped out of the car, Rachel's arms were around her. She didn't say a word, just held her sister in a fierce, protective embrace. In that silent hug, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her grief. The strength she had summoned to confront Ben, to throw him out of her house, crumbled into dust. She clung to Rachel, her body racked with sobs, the raw, primal sounds of a heart breaking. "I know," Rachel murmured, her hand stroking Sarah's hair. "I know. Let it out. You're safe here." Inside, Rachel's apartment was a reflection of her personality. Warm, eclectic, and filled with life. Books overflowed from shelves, colourful paintings adorned the walls, and a half-finished pottery project sat on a table in the corner. It was a space that buzzed with creative energy, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection Sarah had so carefully curated in her own home. Rachel, a high school art teacher with a practical, no-nonsense approach to life, settled Sarah onto a plush, velvet couch, wrapped a handmade quilt around her shoulders, and pressed a steaming mug of tea into her hands. "Now," Rachel said, sitting opposite her, her expression a mixture of fierce loyalty and deep concern. "Tell me everything." And so, the story spilled out of her. The late night, the strange car, the woman, the kiss, the lies. She recounted the conversation, the hollow words, the year of deceit that had been hiding in plain sight. With each word, the reality of the situation became more concrete, more undeniable. Saying it out loud made it real. Rachel listened without interruption, her anger a palpable force in the room. When Sarah finally fell silent, her voice hoarse from crying, Rachel's eyes were blazing. "I'm going to kill him," she said, her voice a low growl. "I am going to find that spineless, cheating weasel, and I am going to dismantle him, piece by piece." Despite the pain, a small, watery smile touched Sarah's lips. It was so typically Rachel, all fire and fury on her behalf. "Get in line," Sarah whispered. "The house, the mortgage, he threw that in your face?" Rachel asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Sarah nodded, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over her. "He made me feel so small, Rach, like I was nothing more than a dependent, a freeloader in my own home. The whole time he was telling me he wanted to take care of me, to provide for us. He was building this narrative with her. That I was a burden. That's not a narrative, Sarah. That's a tactic," Rachel said, her teacher voice emerging. "It's about control. He makes you financially dependent, isolates you from your career, and then uses that dependence to justify his own horrific behavior. It's classic psychological manipulation. He wanted to keep you in a box, and when you found out he had another box for his mistress, he tried to make you feel like you didn't even deserve the one you were in." Hearing it laid out so clinically, so logically, was both jarring and clarifying. Sarah had been swimming in a sea of emotional chaos, but Rachel had thrown her a lifeline of rational thought. The power imbalance wasn't just about money, it was about control. Ben hadn't just cheated, he had actively undermined her sense of self-worth to facilitate his betrayal. "What about the baby?" Rachel asked, her voice softening. "He tried to use the baby," Sarah said, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. "He said we should work through it for the baby, as if this innocent child should be the glue that holds together a broken, toxic marriage. Good for you for not falling for that," Rachel said, her pride evident. "That's the oldest trick in the cheater's handbook. He doesn't care about the baby's well-being. He cares about his own. He wants to avoid the consequences, the public shame, the financial fallout. He wants to keep his comfortable life, and he's willing to use his own unborn child as a shield. The days that followed were a fog of grief and exhaustion. Sarah slept in Rachel's spare room, a cozy, sunlit space with a view of a small, overgrown garden. She spent hours just staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the last year of her life, searching for signs she had missed. Had there been a shift in his touch? A new password on his phone? A sudden interest in working late? The clues were there, she realized now, a breadcrumb trail of deceit she had been too blind, too trusting to see. She was grappling with a profound, psychological conflict. Part of her, the part that had loved Ben for a decade, desperately wanted to believe there was a way back. It whispered to her in the dead of night, reminding her of his easy laugh, of the way he looked at her on their wedding day, of the shared history that was woven into the very fabric of her being. This part of her mourned the loss of the future she had so vividly imagined, a future that now lay in ruins, but another part of her, a newer, stronger part that was forged in the fire of his betrayal, knew that there was no going back. This part of her was fueled by a cold, hard anger. It was the part that recognized the depth of his manipulation, the calculated cruelty of his actions. It was the part that knew that the man she had married was a stranger, a carefully constructed facade hiding a hollow core. Rachel was her anchor in this storm. She didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. She simply sat with Sarah in her grief, making sure she ate, dragging her out for short walks in the crisp autumn air, and providing a constant, grounding presence. She was the one who gently suggested Sarah call a lawyer, just to know your options. She was the one who fielded the barrage of texts and voicemails from Ben, her responses a masterclass in protective fury. "He says he's sorry," Rachel reported one evening, her phone in her hand, her expression one of deep disgust. "He says he'll do anything to make it right. He wants to know where you are." "Don't tell him," Sarah said, her voice flat. "Wouldn't dream of it," Rachel said, typing a sharp reply. "I've informed him that all future communication will be through your legal counsel. Which reminds me, I made an appointment for you with a woman named Eleanor Vance. She's a shark, apparently. A very expensive, very effective shark." The thought of lawyers and divorce proceedings sent a wave of nausea through Sarah. It was so final, so clinical. But Rachel was right. She needed to protect herself. And more importantly, she needed to protect her baby. That night, as she lay in the unfamiliar bed, the sounds of the city a low hum outside her window, Sarah felt a subtle shift within her. The overwhelming grief was still there, a heavy cloak she couldn't yet shed. But beneath it, a tiny, fragile seed of something else was beginning to sprout. It was a flicker of anger, yes, but it was more than that. It was a sense of resolve. Ben had taken her past and poisoned it. He had stolen the future they were supposed to share. But he would not take this baby. He would not take her strength. She had lost her husband, her home, her sense of security. But she would not lose herself. In the quiet refuge of her sister's home, surrounded by unwavering love and support, Sarah began to understand that this was not just an ending. It was, in the most painful way imaginable, a new beginning. Eleanor Vance's office was the physical embodiment of quiet, expensive power. Located on the top floor of a sleek glass and steel skyscraper overlooking the Scioto Mile, it was a world of muted greys, polished chrome, and commanding views. The air itself seemed to hum with a low frequency of competence and authority. Eleanor, a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes, and a salt and pepper bob that was as precise as her legal arguments, did not waste time with pleasantries. "Rachel told me the broad strokes," she said, her voice calm and measured as she gestured for Sarah to sit in a leather chair that was surprisingly comfortable. "I'm sorry for what you're going through. Now tell me everything, and don't leave out a single detail. The more I know, the better I can protect you and your child." For the second time in as many weeks, Sarah recounted the story of Ben's betrayal. But this time it was different, filtered through the lens of legal strategy, the emotional, personal tragedy transformed into a series of facts, assets, and liabilities. The house, the cars, Ben's salary, his 401k, the joint savings account, they were no longer symbols of a shared life, but pieces on a chessboard. The affair itself, while emotionally devastating, has limited legal standing in a no-fault state like Ohio, Eleanor explained, making notes on a legal pad with a fountain pen. But his behavior, his financial control, his attempt to bring the other woman into the marital home, that speaks to character. And character can be very important when it comes to determining spousal and child support. She paused, her sharp gaze meeting Sarah's. "He's been trying to contact you. Constantly," Sarah said, her voice weary. "Texts, emails, voicemails. He even sent flowers to Rachel's place. I don't know how he found the address." "He's trying to control the narrative," Eleanor said, nodding. "He wants to get to you before you have time to think, to build a case. He wants to play on your history, your emotions. He wants you to believe this is a simple mistake that can be fixed with apologies and promises. Do not engage. Let me be your shield." The word shield resonated with Sarah. It was exactly what she needed. She felt so exposed, so raw. The idea of having someone as formidable as Eleanor Vance standing between her and Ben was a profound relief. "I need you to do something for me," Eleanor continued, her tone shifting from empathetic counsel to strategic commander. "It's going to be difficult, but it's necessary. I need you to go back to the house." Sarah's heart plummeted. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't go back there." "You have to," Eleanor said, her voice firm but not unkind. "He's moved out, correct? He's staying with a friend?" "He said he was," Sarah confirmed. "Good. Then he has established a new primary residence. The house is, for now, yours. You need to go back and gather any and all financial documents you can find. Bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns, investment portfolios, pay stubs. Anything with his name on it. I suspect that a man who can maintain a secret life for over a year is also capable of maintaining secret finances." The thought was chilling. Sarah had never questioned their finances. Ben handled everything. He'd told her it was so she wouldn't have to worry, another one of his grand, protective gestures that now seemed so sinister. He would show her a spreadsheet at the end of each month, a neat summary of their income and expenses. She had trusted him completely. The idea that he might have been hiding money, that his betrayal might have a financial dimension, was a new layer of violation. Rachel, ever the loyal soldier, insisted on going with her. They drove to the house in the middle of a weekday, a time when the quiet suburban street was mostly deserted. As Sarah put her key in the lock, the same lock Ben's key had scraped just weeks before, a wave of nausea washed over her. The house was cold and silent. It no longer felt like her home. It was a crime scene, and she was a detective searching for clues to a life she hadn't known she was living. "Okay," Rachel said, rubbing her hands together. "Operation Uncover the Weasel's Secrets is a go. Where do we start?" "His office," Sarah said, her voice resolute. Ben's home office, like the rest of the house, was a study in curated perfection. A large mahogany desk, an ergonomic chair, shelves lined with architectural books and awards. It was the nerve center of his professional life, and, Sarah suspected, his secret one as well. She sat down in his chair, the leather still holding the faint scent of his cologne. It was a strangely intimate act, a violation of his private space, but she felt no guilt. He had forfeited that right. She turned on his desktop computer, her heart pounding. She had always known his password. It was the date of their anniversary. She typed it in, half expecting him to have changed it. He hadn't. The desktop sprang to life, revealing a neatly organized screen of folders and icons. For a moment, she didn't know where to look. It felt like an impossible task, searching for a needle in a digital haystack. "Check his email," Rachel suggested, peering over her shoulder. The sent folder, the trash. People are lazy. They rarely delete everything. Sarah opened his email client. The inbox was mostly work-related, a flurry of correspondence about blueprints, zoning laws, and client meetings. But then she saw it. A folder on the side panel, innocuously labeled Personal Projects. Her hand trembled as she clicked on it. It was a treasure trove of deceit. There were emails going back more than 2 years, not one. Emails between Ben and Jessica Reynolds. They were filled with inside jokes, pet names, and plans for secret rendezvous. There were confirmations for hotel rooms in cities where Ben was supposedly on business trips alone. There were links to restaurants she'd never heard of, theaters she'd never been to. But it was the financial discoveries that truly took her breath away. Tucked within the emails were PDF attachments of credit card statements for an account Sarah had never known existed. A card in his name, with a billing address for a P.O. box downtown. The statements were a roadmap of his affair. There were charges for expensive dinners, weekend getaways, and jewelry. A diamond necklace from Tiffany's, purchased just last Christmas, a time when Ben had told her they needed to be frugal because of the baby on the way. He had given her a thoughtful but modest gift, a first edition of her favorite book. "The son of a bitch," Rachel breathed, her voice a low, furious hiss. But there was more. Deeper in the folder, Sarah found a series of emails with a financial advisor. They discussed an investment account, also in Ben's name only. He had been siphoning money from his bonuses, funds that Sarah thought were going into their joint savings for the baby's future, and funneling them into this secret account. The balance was staggering, nearly $100,000. The hidden motive, the why behind his betrayal, was suddenly crystal clear, and it was uglier than simple infidelity. This wasn't just a man having an affair. This was a man systematically building a separate life, a life he was funding with their shared resources. He wasn't just cheating on her, he was stealing from her, from their child. Jessica wasn't just a mistress, she was a co-conspirator in a long-term plan. What was the end game? Was he planning on leaving her after the baby was born? Was he going to drain their joint accounts and disappear? The power imbalance she had felt was not just psychological. It was a calculated financial strategy. He had made her dependent so he could plunder their assets without scrutiny. The man she had trusted with her life, her future, her body, had been playing a long con. Sarah felt a strange sense of calm descend upon her. The pain was still there, a deep, throbbing ache. But it was now overlaid with a cold, clear fury. The grief-stricken wife was gone, replaced by a woman with a mission. She began to methodically download every email, every statement, every piece of evidence onto a flash drive. Each click of the mouse was a nail in the coffin of her old life, but it was also a brick in the foundation of her new one. She was no longer just a victim. She was a survivor, and she had the evidence to prove it. As they were about to leave, Sarah's eyes fell on a small, leather-bound journal on the corner of the desk, one she had given him years ago. He had never used it. On a whim, she opened it. The first few pages were blank, but then, tucked into the back pocket, was a single, folded piece of paper. It was a lease agreement for a downtown apartment in both their names, Ben Collins and Jessica Reynolds. It was dated 6 months ago. He hadn't just been planning a future with this woman. He had already started building it. He had a whole other home, a whole other life, running in parallel to the one he shared with Sarah. The house with the sage-green nursery was just a stage, and she had been the unwitting lead actress in a play she didn't know she was in. She folded the paper and put it in her purse, along with the flash drive. The unveiling was complete. The man she thought she knew was a complete fabrication, and now she had everything she needed to tear the whole facade down. The weeks following the discovery in Ben's office were a crucible. The cold, hard evidence on the flash drive acted as a strange sort of anchor, grounding Sarah in the reality of her situation. There was no more room for doubt, no lingering whispers of "what if?" The man she had married was a stranger, a masterful architect of deceit, and the life they had shared was a meticulously crafted illusion. The grief was still a constant companion, a dull ache behind her ribs, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was now mingled with a potent, clarifying anger that propelled her forward. She met with Eleanor Vance again, this time armed with a formidable arsenal of evidence. As Sarah laid out the credit card statements, the investment portfolio, and the lease agreement on the polished mahogany table, she saw a flicker of something akin to admiration in the lawyer's sharp eyes. "Well," Eleanor said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face, "this changes things. This isn't just infidelity anymore. This is a clear case of dissipation of marital assets. He has been actively defrauding you and your unborn child. We're no longer asking for a fair settlement, Sarah. We're going on the offensive." The shift in language, from defense to offense, was empowering. For the first time since she'd opened that door, Sarah felt a flicker of agency, a sense that she was no longer just reacting to the wreckage of her life, but actively taking control of its reconstruction. Eleanor's strategy was swift and decisive. She filed for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences, and simultaneously filed a motion to freeze all of their assets, both joint and individual. This included the secret investment account. The legal papers were served to Ben at his prestigious downtown firm, an act of calculated precision designed to strip away his carefully maintained veneer of respectability. The fallout was immediate. Ben's barrage of pleading texts and emails stopped, replaced by a single furious phone call to Eleanor, which she recounted to Sarah with grim satisfaction. He had been blindsided, enraged that his private dealings had been exposed. He had accused Sarah of being vindictive, of trying to ruin him. "He's not angry that he got caught," Eleanor had told her, her voice dry. "He's angry that he lost control. That's what this has always been about for him. Control. And we just took it away from him." While the legal battle raged in the background, Sarah focused on the monumental task of building a new life. Rachel's spare room, once a temporary refuge, began to feel more like a command center. Armed with her laptop and a growing sense of determination, Sarah started to reclaim the parts of herself she had let go of during her marriage. Her first step was to resurrect her career. She had been a talented graphic designer, with a portfolio of freelance work she had been proud of. She spent hours updating her website, crafting a new resume, and reaching out to old contacts. It was daunting at first. The industry had changed, and her confidence was shaky. But with each email she sent, with each positive response she received, a piece of the old Sarah, the ambitious, creative woman she had been before Ben, began to re-emerge. She landed a small freelance project, designing a logo for a local bakery. The pay was modest, but the feeling of earning her own money, of creating something tangible and beautiful, was priceless. It was a declaration of independence, a small but significant step toward financial and emotional self-sufficiency. Her focus also shifted to her pregnancy. She found a new OB-GYN in the city, a warm, reassuring woman who treated her not as a high-risk case, but as a strong, capable single mother-to-be. She signed up for a prenatal yoga class where she met other expectant mothers. In their shared stories of swollen ankles, strange cravings, and hopes for the future, she found a sense of community she hadn't realized she was missing. These women weren't interested in the brand of her stroller or the size of her house. They were interested in her journey. They talked about birth plans and breastfeeding, about navigating maternity leave and childcare. For the first time, Sarah began to envision a future for her and her baby that wasn't defined by loss, but by possibility. A future that was entirely her own. One afternoon, as she was sitting in a sunny cafe, sketching out logo ideas for the bakery, her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I think we should talk. I know a place that's quiet." Jessica. Sarah's blood ran cold. Her first instinct was to delete the message, to block the number, to follow Eleanor's advice and refuse all contact. But a different, more powerful impulse took hold. She was tired of hiding. She was tired of being the victim. She had questions, and this woman, the architect of her pain, had the answers. She agreed to meet, choosing the location herself, a busy, public park in the middle of the day. She would not give Jessica the advantage of a private, intimate setting. Jessica was already there, sitting on a bench overlooking a duck pond. She looked different in the harsh light of day, smaller, less formidable than the glamorous phantom who had haunted Sarah's nightmares. She was still beautiful, but up close, Sarah could see the faint lines of stress around her eyes, the slight tremor in her manicured hands. "Thank you for coming," Jessica said, her voice lacking the smooth confidence Sarah remembered. "I'm not here for you," Sarah said, her voice steady. She remained standing, a subtle assertion of power. "I'm here for me. I want to know why." Jessica sighed, her gaze fixed on the ducks gliding across the water. "I could tell you I fell in love with him. I could tell you he was unhappy, that your marriage was already over. He told me it was. He said you were distant, cold, that you'd changed. The familiar narrative, the one Ben had tried to sell her, had no power over her anymore. He was lying to you, just like he was lying to me," Sarah said, her voice flat. Jessica gave a short, bitter laugh. "I'm starting to realize that. He told me he was going to leave you after the baby was born. He said it would be cleaner that way. He promised me we would have the house, a life together. He was building a nest egg for us, for our future." "Our future," Sarah repeated, the words tasting like poison. "He was stealing from his own child's future to build one with you." For the first time, Jessica looked directly at Sarah, and in her eyes, Sarah saw not malice, but a reflection of her own disillusionment. "He played us, didn't he?" Jessica said, her voice barely a whisper. "He told each of us exactly what we wanted to hear. He made you the dependent, stay-at-home wife so he could control the finances. He made me the exciting, successful career woman who understood his ambition. We were just two sides of the same coin for him. Two roles he needed someone to play." The revelation was staggering. It wasn't a simple case of a man choosing one woman over another. Ben hadn't loved either of them. He had loved the power, the control, the thrill of maintaining two separate, carefully curated lives. He was a narcissist, a man so hollow at his core that he needed constant validation from multiple sources. When your lawyer served him the papers at his office, they put him on leave, Jessica said, her voice cracking. The partners are investigating his finances, the apartment we leased. He used a fraudulent credit report. He's ruined, and he's trying to blame me, to blame you. He's trying to say we conspired against him. A strange, unexpected feeling washed over Sarah. It wasn't pity, but it wasn't satisfaction either. It was a sense of profound clarity. She and Jessica were not rivals. They were both victims of the same man's pathological selfishness. He won't win, Sarah said, and the words were a promise to herself as much as a statement to Jessica. He's not going to ruin my life, and he's not going to ruin my babies. She turned to leave. The conversation finished. She had gotten what she came for. Not an apology, not an explanation, but the final, irrefutable truth. "Sarah," Jessica called out. She had stood up, her face pale. "For what it's worth, I am truly sorry. For my part in all of this, and for your baby." Sarah paused, her back still to the other woman. She thought of the long road ahead, the legal battles, the challenges of single motherhood. But for the first time, she felt a genuine sense of peace. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a clean, quiet strength. She was rising from the ashes of her old life, not as a victim, but as the sole architect of her new one. She didn't reply. She just kept walking, her head held high, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly, a silent promise to the new life that was growing within her. The future was uncertain, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The calm that had settled over Sarah after her meeting with Jessica was short-lived. It was the quiet eye of the storm, a brief respite before the full fury of the gauntlet Ben intended to throw down was unleashed. His initial shock and rage had morphed into a calculated, vicious legal strategy. Stripped of his ability to manipulate her emotionally, he now wielded the only weapon he had left: money and the legal system. He hired a notoriously aggressive lawyer, a man whose reputation for scorched-earth tactics was whispered with a mixture of fear and awe in legal circles. The first salvo was a countersuit, a document filled with such outrageous lies and distortions that it felt like a piece of fiction. He accused Sarah of being emotionally unstable, of having an affair herself, of being an unfit mother. He claimed the money in his secret account was a family inheritance, and that she was a gold digger trying to extort him. He even contested the freeze on his assets, claiming it was preventing him from paying his own living expenses, despite the six-figure salary he still drew while on leave. "It's a classic narcissist's defense," Eleanor Vance explained, her voice a low, steady hum over the phone. She was completely unfazed. Attack, deny, and reverse, victim and offender. He's not trying to win on the merits of the case. He's trying to wear you down. He wants to exhaust you emotionally and financially until you give up and accept a lowball settlement. We won't let that happen. But knowing the strategy and living through it were two very different things. The legal battle became a war of attrition. There were depositions, endless requests for documents, and motions designed to delay and harass. Each legal document that arrived was a fresh assault, a new attempt to rewrite their history and paint her as the villain. The stress began to take a physical toll. Sarah suffered from sleepless nights, her mind racing with anxieties. The baby, as if sensing her turmoil, was often restless, its frantic movements a mirror of her own churning emotions. The biggest challenge came during a scheduled mediation session. Eleanor had warned her that it would be difficult, but Sarah was unprepared for the visceral shock of seeing Ben in person for the first time in months. He sat across the long, polished conference table, looking thinner, his face drawn and pale. but the air of arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. He refused to make eye contact, directing all his comments to his lawyer. His lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Marcus Thorne, opened with an offer so insulting it was laughable. They offered Sarah a fraction of the marital assets, no spousal support, and a child support payment that wouldn't even cover the cost of diapers. "My client is prepared to offer this out of the goodness of his heart," Thorne said, his voice smooth as oil, despite Miss Collins's erratic behavior and questionable moral character. "We believe a lengthy court battle would be detrimental to the child, and we are confident that a judge would see the merits of our case regarding Ms. Collins's fitness as a parent." The threat was clear. "Take this pittance, or we will drag your name through the mud and try to take your child." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. She looked at Ben, at the man who had once promised to love and protect her, who was now threatening to destroy her, and felt a surge of white-hot fury. "No," she said, her voice shaking but clear. Eleanor placed a calming hand on her arm. "My client rejects your offer," she said, her tone icy. She then systematically dismantled their arguments, presenting the evidence of Ben's financial fraud, the lease for his secret apartment, the credit card statements detailing his lavish spending on his mistress. "Your client is the one whose moral character is in question, Mr. Thorne, and we have the receipts to prove it. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to inform you of what we will be presenting in court. We are confident that a judge will not only award my client her rightful share of the marital assets, but will also take a very dim view of your client's attempts to hide money from his pregnant wife." The mediation ended in a stalemate, but Sarah left with a renewed sense of resolve. Ben's threats had been designed to intimidate her, to make her feel small and powerless, but they had the opposite effect. They had ignited a fire within her, a fierce, protective instinct that she hadn't known she possessed. He was not just attacking her anymore, he was attacking her child, and she would not let him win. The financial strain of the legal battle was immense. Eleanor's fees were substantial, and Sarah's freelance work, while growing, was not enough to cover the mounting bills. She had to dip into her own small savings, the money she had carefully set aside before her marriage. It was a humbling, terrifying experience. There were days when she would stand in the grocery store, calculating the cost of every item, a stark contrast to the thoughtless spending of her previous life. One evening, overwhelmed by stress and exhaustion, she felt a sharp, cramping pain in her lower abdomen. Panic seized her. She called her doctor, who advised her to go to the hospital immediately. Rachel, her face a mask of concern, drove her, breaking every speed limit. Lying in the sterile, brightly lit hospital room, hooked up to a fetal monitor, Sarah felt a terror unlike anything she had ever known. The legal battles, the financial worries, the heartbreak, it all faded into insignificance. All that mattered was the tiny, precious life inside her. The doctor, a kind, grey-haired man with a calming bedside manner, came in after what felt like an eternity. "The baby is fine," he said, his voice gentle. "Your blood pressure is a little high, and you're showing signs of preterm labor, likely brought on by stress. We've given you a steroid shot to help the baby's lungs develop, just in case. But for now, the contractions have stopped. The best thing you can do for this baby is to rest and avoid stress as much as possible." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her stress, her fight with Ben, was physically endangering her child. She had been so focused on winning the war, she hadn't realized the toll it was taking on the very person she was fighting for. Lying in the quiet darkness of the hospital room that night, listening to the steady, rhythmic beat of her baby's heart on the monitor, Sarah had an epiphany. Winning wasn't about destroying Ben in court. It wasn't about getting every last penny she was owed. Winning was about bringing her child into the world, healthy and safe. Winning was about creating a peaceful, loving home, free from the toxicity and conflict of the past. The next day, she called Eleanor. "I want to settle," she said, her voice firm. "Sarah, we're so close," Eleanor protested. "We have him on the ropes." "I know," Sarah said. "But it's not worth it. The stress is putting the baby at risk. No amount of money is worth that. Let's make them a fair offer. One that gives me what I need to start over, to provide for my child. But I'm done fighting. I'm choosing my baby. I'm choosing peace." It was the hardest decision she had ever had to make. It felt like letting him win. But as she said the words, a profound sense of relief washed over her. She was not surrendering. She was redefining victory. Eleanor, after a long pause, finally agreed. "I understand," she said, her voice filled with a newfound respect. "You're making a mother's choice. Let's draft an offer." They offered to split the known marital assets, including the house, down the middle. They would drop the motion regarding the dissipation of assets in exchange for a lump sum spousal support payment and a generous, non-negotiable child support agreement. It was less than she could have gotten in court, but it was enough. It was a clean break. Ben, likely advised by his lawyer that a jury would be deeply unsympathetic to his case, accepted the offer. The war was over. Sarah walked out of the lawyer's office into the bright afternoon sun, feeling lighter than she had in months. She had walked through the gauntlet and emerged, not unscathed, but whole. She had faced the worst of her fears: financial ruin, public humiliation, the threat of losing her child, and she had survived. She had learned to fight, but more importantly, she had learned when to stop fighting. She placed a hand on her belly, where the baby was now resting peacefully. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered. "And we're going to be okay." The final months of Sarah's pregnancy were a period of quiet, deliberate reconstruction. With the legal battle behind her, a weight had been lifted, not just from her mind, but from her very soul. The air seemed easier to breathe, the colors of the world more vibrant. The settlement, while not the windfall Eleanor had initially aimed for, was more than enough. It provided security, a foundation upon which she could build her new life. Her first act of redemption was to reclaim her home. Walking back into the house she had once shared with Ben was a strange experience. It was no longer a crime scene or a battleground, but simply a space, a collection of rooms waiting to be filled with new memories. With Rachel's help, she began the process of purging the past. They packed away the photos of her and Ben, the wedding gifts, the remnants of a life that was no longer hers. They painted over the neutral, sophisticated greys with warm, cheerful colors. The large leather armchair, once a symbol of their compromised tastes, was sold online, replaced by a comfortable, stylish rocking chair, perfect for nursing a newborn. The most significant transformation took place in Ben's old office. Sarah turned it into her own design studio. The mahogany desk was replaced with a large white drafting table. The shelves once lined with his architectural awards now held her art books, pots of colorful pens, and inspiration boards filled with fabric swatches and beautiful typography. It was a space that was entirely hers, a testament to her talent and her newfound independence. Her freelance business was thriving, her reputation for clean, elegant design growing by word of mouth. She was not just surviving, she was flourishing. She also focused on redeeming her definition of family. Her old vision, The nuclear family with the white picket fence had been shattered. In its place, she was building something new, something more resilient. Her bond with Rachel, always strong, had deepened into an unbreakable alliance. Her sister was her rock, her confidant, her co-conspirator in all things baby-related. Her parents, who had been horrified by Ben's betrayal, wrapped her in a cocoon of unconditional love and support, respecting her decisions and celebrating her strength. Her circle of friends from her prenatal yoga class became her village, a community of women navigating the beautiful, chaotic journey of motherhood together. They threw her a baby shower in the backyard of her reclaimed home. It was a sun-drenched afternoon, filled with laughter, joy, and an overwhelming sense of female solidarity. As she sat in her new rocking chair, surrounded by women who loved and supported her, opening gifts of tiny socks and soft blankets, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her family was not broken. It had simply been redefined. 2 weeks before her due date, Sarah went into labor. It was a long and arduous process, a testament to the strength and endurance she had cultivated over the past 9 months. Rachel was by her side the entire time, a fierce and loving coach, holding her hand, wiping her brow, and whispering words of encouragement. And then, in the quiet, early hours of a new day, her son was born. They placed him on her chest, a tiny, perfect creature with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's wide, curious eyes. He was warm and solid, his small body fitting perfectly in the curve of her arms. As she looked at his face, a wave of love so powerful, so all-encompassing, washed over her, erasing the last vestiges of pain and bitterness from her heart. This was what it had all been for. This was the redemption. She named him Noah. It meant rest and comfort, everything she hoped to give him, everything he had already given her. In the days that followed, Sarah's world shrank to the size of her small, perfect son. The sleepless nights, the endless cycle of feeding and changing, the overwhelming responsibility. It was all consuming, but it was a beautiful, sacred exhaustion. She would spend hours just watching him sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling, his small hand wrapped around her finger. He was a part of her, but he was also his own person, a new beginning, a clean slate. One afternoon, about a week after Noah was born, a package arrived. It was a small, flat box with no return address. Hesitantly, she opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a simple, elegant silver locket. There was a note, written in a familiar, precise handwriting. Sarah, there are no words to express the depth of my regret. I know that sorry is a meaningless word after what I did. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I have started therapy to understand the man I became, the man who could cause such pain to the person he loved most in the world. I have a long way to go. I heard about the baby, a son. I hope one day he will know that his father's failings are not his own. I have set up a trust fund for him, which my lawyer will be in contact with yours about. It's the least I can do. It's not an attempt to buy my way back into your lives, but a genuine desire to provide for my son. I will not contact you again. I will respect your peace. I wish you nothing but happiness. Ben, Sarah read the note, her heart a strange mixture of emotions. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet, detached sadness for the man he had been, and the man he was trying to become. His redemption was his own journey, separate from hers. She hoped, for his sake, that he would find it. But his path was no longer her concern. She looked at the locket. It was beautiful, but it was a relic from a past she had moved on from. She put it away in a box with the other remnants of her old life. She didn't need his gifts or his apologies. She had everything she needed right here in her arms. Later that evening, she sat in the rocking chair in Noah's nursery, the room bathed in the soft glow of a moonbeam. The sage-green walls, once a symbol of a shared, broken dream, now felt peaceful and serene. She held her son close, his warm breath on her neck, and hummed a soft lullaby. She thought about the woman she had been 9 months ago, the woman who had opened a door and watched her world crumble. That woman was gone. In her place was a mother, a survivor, a warrior. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more fiercely alive than ever before. Her marriage had ended, but her life had not. Her story was not one of tragedy. It was a story of redemption. Not his, but hers. She had redeemed her life from the ashes of his lies, building a future filled with love, strength, and the quiet, profound joy of a mother holding her child. As Noah drifted off to sleep, a small, contented smile on his lips, Sarah knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was not an ending. This was just the beginning. Sarah's journey from devastating heartbreak to powerful redemption is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Her story reminds us that even when our worlds are shattered, we have the strength within us to rebuild, to redefine our futures, and to find happiness on our own terms. It's a story of a mother's fierce love, a woman's unwavering courage, and the discovery that sometimes the end of one chapter is simply the beginning of a much better one. If Sarah's story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear a message of hope and strength. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories that explore the complexities of life and love. Thank you for watching.